Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome back to another episode of Causon and the Customer, our weekly podcast discussing all things customer service and effective business leadership with some of the most knowledgeable on the subject. Last time I had a fantastic discussion with the Financial Times consumer editor Claire Barrett, where we dissected the current state of customer service and indeed customer loyalty in the UK. Now this week we have a very timely discussion indeed, as we come into the so-called golden quarter, the busiest period of retail overall, and in particular for food retail. And I am absolutely delighted to be joined this podcast with Simon Roberts, who is CEO of Sainsbury's. And he joins me today to discuss the challenges facing food retailers and what business leaders in this space should be focusing on as competition ever grows to ensure that we can start to really grow the UK economy. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I've had the privilege and pleasure of knowing Simon for quite a long time. And he really will show you the importance of customer experience, employee engagement and financial results. So I really hope you enjoy it too. So it's a real privilege today to be joined for this week's podcast by Simon Roberts, who is CEO of Sainsbury's. Now, I have had the privilege, and it is a privilege, of knowing Simon now for a number of years. And what can I say about him? I think probably the best way to describe Simon is that not only is a brilliant strategist, but he really understands how you deliver operational excellence from a customer service lens. And he does all of that with great humility. So I'm really pleased that he's taken the time, he's a very busy man, to be with us, to really kind of shine a bit of a spotlight onto how he is delivering brilliant, and his teams are delivering brilliant customer experience within Sainsbury's. So Simon, thank you genuinely for taking some time to be with us today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Joe.
So Simon, maybe we can start by just talking a little bit about Sainsbury's. And how long have you been CEO now at Sainsbury's? 3 years?
That's actually 4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Yeah.
That shows how fast it actually does go. So what are the sorts of kind of things that you're working on at the moment? And, you know, you've very famously been talking about your strategy. So let's talk a little bit about that and where you're taking that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, look, I mean, the first thing is Sainsbury's has been around for over 150 years. So, you know, the thing that's really important for us is to make sure that we do the best job we can for our customers in food, because that's what our history is all about and that's what customers expect of us. So, you know, I think in the last few years, we've been really thinking about what is it going to take to make sure that more customers think of Sainsbury's as their first choice of food. But I think it's really interesting when we think about what's going on in the minds of customers every day is, you know, some things in the last decade or so have changed beyond any possible imagination we could have had about how customer attitudes and behaviours would have changed. But actually, some things haven't changed at all. And in the sector that I'm in food grocery, there's really 3 or 4 things that just really matter for customers all the time. Obviously, we all shop for food, you know, every day, every week, and the price of our food really matters. Secondly, nothing's more frustrating, is it, if you want to put a meal together or get your weekly groceries in, than making sure everything's in stock. You know, one of the biggest things that, you know, we have to make sure we get better and better on is that we've always got things that customers want to buy. And then I think the other thing that's really come through in the last few years is actually people want to try new types of food. And whether that be because there's somebody in the family that has, you know, different dietary needs, they want to buy gluten-free products or dairy-free products, or the fact that actually most of us rely on 4 or 5 meals that we cook all the time. And so people want to try new things. So the kind of combination of price and availability and new food ideas are kind of where a lot of our energy is going at the moment. And then the other really big obvious point is that, you know, we're in a really competitive industry. And not to be, you know, complaining about that, because I think competition is really good. You know, in the UK we have lots of really successful grocery companies who all compete very well with their competitors. But we have to recognise the fact that we've got to become more efficient as well, whilst making sure customers get a really good service. And that's one of the, you know, tensions and challenges we're trying to deal with all the time.
So on that, Simon, I think recently you were talking about, there used to be a stage when we might go shop in one particular supermarket, then go and shop for something else over here and something over there. There's been a bit of a change of that, hasn't there? The fact that actually perhaps we're a bit more loyal now, or we're going to go to a one-stop shop. Do you think that's because of thinking a bit beyond not just pricing, but as you've said, trying to think about the whole customer journey and trying to ensure that there's something for everyone in your offer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that, one of the things that we would observe is as we come through a pandemic and then clearly through a major inflation crisis, that's caused customers, households, families to really change how they shop. And, clearly, in food and grocery, we see that very regularly every week. And so what are the things that we're seeing happening? Well, I think for any of us that are on the tube or train into London now, what's the biggest thing that's happening? Everyone's back in the office.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's interesting just this week to see Amazon have just said to all of their colleagues back in the office for 5 days a week. So we're seeing a very big shift in working patterns. By the way, I'm a big fan of smart, flexible working, so that's not necessarily where everyone might go. But the point I'm making is that people are busier again.
Yes.
They're back in the office, and so perhaps they've got less time to visit lots of different shops.
So convenience is starting to become more important.
Exactly right. So what we're seeing is customers saying, can I come into a store and get everything I need for my family? The second thing I think we've seen, particularly after the inflation crisis that we've had, is that many more of us are eating at home more rather than eating out.
Yeah.
Now, the reasons for that, obviously, are just the cost of eating out has been one of the biggest areas of inflation. And so we're seeing a lot more desire to try new things at home, to cook more at home. And so that's one of the reasons why I think, for supermarkets that have a big range, they're becoming the place that customers want to go more often for those reasons. And then the last thing we've seen quite recently, actually, is a lift again in online shopping, which I think is also part of this trend of being, busier again, back in the office, maybe at home less, and therefore the convenience of shopping online.
And also back to your point about looking for more interesting food, maybe, and more diverse.
Yeah.
And our population is more diverse.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So the ability to be able to serve it. That sounds like a pretty tough gig, right? Because you've got to be really driving that price. You've got to be able to give all sorts of different kind of offers. So how do you differentiate? What for you makes Sainsbury's stand outside? What would you be famous for?
Well, look, I think, we should always be really honest with ourselves, right? In the grocery industry, most competitors do a lot of things in quite a similar way, right? So I think that's an important start point. What is important to us as a team at Sainsbury's? Well, for 150 years, actually, quality has always been a really key kind of foundation of why customers will shop at Sainsbury's. And, as we've been working out how we encourage more customers to come back to us, one of the things that, is so important is that we don't put that in jeopardy at all.
Yeah.
And so what we've been working on is how do we make lots of, savings across the company so that we can reinvest those savings in being better value for money. And if I was to say to you 4 or 5 years ago, there was quite a gap between us and some of our direct competitors. And now we are the best value we've been probably in a decade plus.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, we're seeing a big shift in customers coming back to the big weekly trolley shop because the value's better, which we've been working on, but also to your point, because you can get everything you need in the store.
Yeah.
We have about 30,000 food products in our stores, and that's what customers want to buy. If you think about some of the other supermarkets that maybe are smaller or they're focusing on a certain position in the market, they have a lot less products in their stores. And so our quality and our assortment, but also our value are the things that we're really trying to differentiate on. And one of the things that I really love about what our team are doing, we're introducing about 1,500 new products every year.
Wow. Okay.
So we have a team of people that are spending lots of time on farms or in factories or in development kitchens, thinking up new ideas for food. And particularly, as I said earlier, people that want to eat different types of products or try new things. Innovation is a massive theme at the moment. And in fact, just as we come into the run up to Christmas, there's going to be more new products this year than at any point in recent years. That's quite exciting.
It's very exciting. So any sneak previews?
Well, I mean, gosh, there are so many things, but I think we have a big kind of event and we get all the press and media to come in, and there's lots of really good treat items this Christmas if you're having like everyone round for special occasion. Game pie actually apparently this year is going to be a really big hit for us, and lots and lots of new snacking and party foods and all these things. So
sounds great.
All things that are going to be special to celebrate with.
Well, we'll certainly look forward to that, Simon, definitely.
Well, have to get everyone into your customer service some samples to try.
I think so. Maybe we have to come for a tasting or something like that. That would be a really great thing. Simon, one of the things we were talking about, and you mentioned innovation, and also there's a couple of things in here. So you talked about innovation, but you also talked about the tension between being able to deliver that brilliant service experience and managing the costs of the business when you are making smaller margins and all of the pressure and inflation, wage inflation, all of the things that we have seen. Now, I've, as I said, had the privilege of working with you for a number of years, and I know you really care deeply about the customer experience. So how come you've managed to achieve that when maybe some organisations, both inside your sector and outside of the sector, haven't? So how do you balance that focus on the delivery of all the things you've talked about passionately, but also, quite frankly, making sure your bottom line and your investors are still happy with you?
It's the key question, because as you say, we have many different stakeholders who will judge ultimately whether we're doing a good enough job or not. And as you just said, clearly customers judge us every day. We should make no mistake, be under no illusion that customers in grocery move between different brands very readily. If a customer was to come into our store today and not be happy with our value, for example, very quickly they move somewhere else. So customers judge us every day. We employ nearly 150,000 colleagues. They do an amazing job looking after our customers, but we've got to make sure we've got the best colleagues in the industry who can serve customers really well. For that reason, we pay a leading rate of pay in the market, which means, to your point, we invest to make sure that we can do that, but we have to therefore find efficiencies to pay for that investment, because clearly our wages bill is our most expensive cost in the company. That's gone up about 10% in the last year, for example, and growth is 10%. So we have to find efficiencies to offset that. And obviously shareholders, as you say, who want to see a return on their investment. So efficiency in our sector is an absolute first priority. And, not surprisingly, a lot of efficiencies have been found over the decades before. So there isn't that much low-hanging kind of opportunity to get after. So we have to be really, really bold and actually really creative about some of the things that we look to do. And this thing is never about a single idea or a silver bullet that solves it. This is always about lots and lots of activity. So we've just come off the back of our first 3-year kind of focus on this, and we saved £1.3 billion of costs in our company, which we reinvested back into lower prices and into paying our colleagues more. And it meant we had to make some hard choices.
Yes. So
to your question on the tensions, we used to have lots of counters in our stores where you'd be able to, go to the counter and get a product from behind the counter. And actually, when we looked at that part of how customers were shopping, it just wasn't working for customers. We were getting a lot of food waste. It was costing a lot to run them. And so it's a good example of something that, lots of people were quite nostalgic about. But it actually wasn't delivering a point of difference that we could justify anymore. In our company, we had, a lot of examples where we were spending money on things that customers didn't really value. And so we had to be, pretty clear about what would continue and what wouldn't. And examples of that would be, we have Argos within our company. Everyone will remember that there used to be a famous Argos catalog, and it was very popular. But actually what we found was, in an internet, driven world, that not only no one used it, but the prices and the content was always a day out of date. So you're printing something that's 1,000 pages long, actually for something that was no longer going to be exactly on the latest news. So they're the examples of the sort of things we had to change.
And some of those are lots of. So your point is just finding and being investigative all the time for all these.
It's a forensic focus on costs all the time.
And they may seem small as individual pieces, but that constantly filtering across the business, how can we do that better?
And also, honestly, this is a really tough challenge for our teams all the time. how do we be just more productive?
Yeah.
So how do we move, stock from A to B more effectively? If you think about it in our company, we're moving every week, tens of millions of cases of food. And every single case takes, a human effort to move it, packaging, and so every single thing we do, we're doing a very big piece of work at the moment, looking at the moment, a product leaves the supplier and comes through the depot and comes to the store and goes into the back of the store and goes to the shelf and ultimately goes into the customer's basket or trolley. How do we find efficiencies all the way through that chain?
Okay, so let's pick up on that, because I think it's a really important point, because what you've talked about is the whole customer journey, and you've talked about from the supplier all the way through to every single stage, and looking for not just efficiency savings, but the most effective way of doing that, and maybe the most effective way of doing that for your colleagues, as well as your customers, as well as your investors. And that's what really strikes me as something that's slightly different, because you are forensic about that. It's not about being soft about any of this. You have to find those savings, but you do it with a lens which is like you're constantly balancing things. If we take that too far, then you might risk, alienating a large group of customers.
Exactly right. I mean, look, and one of the things maybe just, as you describe that, Joe, is that we've all worked in organisations that are made up of functions. We
silos.
work this part of the, finance or commercial or retail, and actually more and more to serve customers and find these efficiencies, you have to work end to end, which actually is a big ask of an organisation to work very differently, and actually of us all as leaders as well, because you can't be just focused on your part of the jigsaw. You've got to think about the whole system.
So you need to attract probably quite selfless people too, because we're not going to have fiefdoms or little pieces anymore. And we have to drive that culture across the whole of the organisation. And I know you lead in that, Simon. You're very visible in your stores. You're very visible in getting out with your deliveries. And those are really important, I think, messages from a leadership point of view, that you're prepared to get your hands dirty and you really understand.
You have to be in the heart of it. You have to know and feel it, don't you? So.
I always remember at one of our board meetings, I think you were in basically a very small broom cupboard at the back of an office of a shop one time. So I can definitely testify to you living that and really driving that. Okay, I can't get through any conversation at the moment, and I want to come on to the innovation bit that we haven't picked up quite so much without talking about AI, where this big thing is going to kind of take us, and this balance. And I've got a bit of a theory at the moment, Simon, because we've talked a little bit before about service with respect and this massive rise of abusive behaviour and this dehumanisation. Now, at the Institute, we're big fans of AI and technology in terms of being able to drive greater efficiencies, but it's its deployment that's going to be really important as far as we're concerned. So how are you, I guess, looking at technology, in particular AI, and where do you see that going in the next 5 years?
Such an important question, Joe, and I think that we've already touched on this, but as we think about how do we serve customers better and also become a lot more efficient, AI definitely presents real opportunity to do that. But I think we have to start with a really important principle, which is about how you bring people and technology together. It's not one or the other. It's a really conscious set of choices about where does having the best people and the best, human interaction really drive distinctiveness.
And really count.
Absolutely. And then where does technology and automation enable you to support your team, be better for customers? And that's the way we think about it. So some of the things that we're doing in the automation and AI space at the moment, which are significant. So we've just automated all of our supply chain forecasting in food across the UK. Why is that really important? It's really important because clearly in a food business, it's something you do every day. First of all, it's a task that you repeat millions of times over. If you think we have about 30,000 products and we have about 1,500 stores, a few less than that, but you get the volume of decisions you're having to make about how much of every product we're sending to every store at every point of time. So we've just put an AI capability to do that into our company. And it's been a fantastic change because...
Have you learnt much?
We've learnt so much, right? And the team that have led it have done an amazing job because we've never done it before. And so what have we learnt? We've learnt, first of all, that we can actually give better availability to customers. Back to what we said earlier. Our availability is lifted 3 points since we put it in place, offered already pretty challenging kind of number. So we're really seeing better availability first thing. And that's not just in the morning at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, but that's in the evening where, previously we weren't always as good. Secondly, we're seeing less food waste because we're getting more accurate on what we're sending to our stores at a given point in time. But actually really importantly, and, I've noticed today, it's, 24, 25 degrees outside in, middle of September today. So what we find is that, the UK isn't the same from a weather or different conditions point of view. And that drives a lot of different behaviours in customers as to what they buy. There's been weekends this summer when there's been a 15-degree difference between the north and the south. So you need different products in different availabilities in different parts of the country. So that would be an example of how we're using AI in the supply chain. And then maybe another one which is super interesting is that, customers more and more are looking for personalised value. And without this being in any way too much of a plug for Nectar, what you can do when you shop at Sainsbury's and you've got Nectar on your phone, every week, the day before we do our biggest shop, and we'll be sent a bunch of personalised prices.
Indeed.
And there are about 95 million permutations of different personalised prices at any point in time, because what will be personalised for you, Joe, or David's with us today as well, or me, will be different.
Yeah.
And so we're using that algorithm, that AI capability to calculate and understand how we serve up that personalised value. So there'll be a couple of examples of things that are happening at scale. And then in a really much smaller way, thinking about all of our store managers are now using Copilot.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think a store manager's time is really valuable, so if they can get some AI capability into the way they're using their technology and their reporting, it saves them loads of time. Because if we can free up 20% of our store managers' time to be with their colleagues and their customers, then
rather than running the reports.
Totally.
Okay, so some really good examples. And what strikes me there is about how you're using it also to really, for predictions, to bring in different data sets. So when you're talking about the weather, I was thinking about, be able to predict in 10 days' time what kind of food stocks you might naturally need because of the weather's going to be doing, whatever it's going to be doing. But it's also interesting how you're using data. And, for a long time, data has always been absolutely critical, but we've never been able to really analyse it or it's just too complex. There's too much of it. And I guess AI, because of the sheer computing power of that, is going to really shift our ability to get through quite a lot of information about customers.
Totally right. And maybe just one line to add to that. One of the things in the UK we have to think about is how do we support our farmers to grow enough food at the right point in time? Because farming's a very tough industry, actually.
And I know you're really big on this, Simon, aren't you, in terms of welfare?
Well, there's definitely welfare and support for, all of the food that gets produced in the UK, but also helping farmers with AI and data to have better insight on the volume that they need to prepare for. So I think, more and more with AI, we've got to think at the system level.
Yes.
What's the customer outcome that's expected or differentiating? And then how do you organise every part of the system to live towards that?
Yeah. And I think, again, that is where you were starting before about the connectivity.
Yeah.
And in a world now which we're so much more connected, really looking at the different impacts of all aspects of
Totally.
Fascinating and really interesting. And we're definitely going to get ourselves to your stall, because I know you've got an innovation stall.
Yeah.
So I'm quite interested in that.
Yeah. I was just, maybe some of the other tensions that we should talk about, because a couple of hot topics definitely in our industry is how customers want to check out in store.
Yeah, self-serve or not.
We get lots of feedback on that, Joe. I know. And look, it's a real challenge for us, right? Because that's the point I made earlier. In some ways, it's kind of pretty irrational, isn't it? If I could say it that way, that you'd go into a supermarket, you'd take a trolley, you'd fill it all up, and then you'd get to the traditional checkout as was, and then you take it all out again.
Yeah.
Then you put it all back in again. So there's a reason that we're trying to save customers time, because actually time is a really big deal when you're under pressure. So lots of customers actually like self-checkouts, and about 65% of all of our customers use a self-checkout. And just to assure you, because I know this will be really important to you, we measure really carefully what the customer satisfaction is on our different methods of payment, and when it's not good enough, we work to improve it. But actually, self-checkout customer satisfaction is one of the highest in the store. But there's lots of customers, I know you'll tell me, you want to use a traditional,
Well, certainly want to have choice. I think choice is being
choice.
probably at different times. It might not be.
Exactly, yeah. So our important to, put on the record, our absolute commitment is however you want to pay, you can pay. Now, if you're in one of our supermarkets because you're very keen early bird at 7 a.m. and there's no one else there, or at 8 p.m. and the checkout isn't open, we'll open it for you. But coming back to the test store that we were describing, we're also trying new ways of customers checking out. There's quite a lot happening in this area at the moment, so I think when you look around the world, everyone's trying to solve how to help customers with a big trolley check out more efficiently. And I think technology will play a really big role here. But also sometimes it's just giving customers choice back, as you say. So we're trialing different types of checkouts where customers can, if they want to use an old, long, traditional type of checkout, we'll let them do that. And we've put some on where they can scan it themselves. There's more space to do that, because quite often customers like to have just less time pressure and more space. We're also using what we call Smart Shop, which means that you can scan as you go around the store. When you do that, that also means that you can get lots of extra value and prices. So we're trying lots in checkouts. That's quite interesting. We're also trying lots of things on sustainability as well, because, in a supermarket, we use lots of electricity. We create lots of carbon. And so thinking about all of the refrigeration or the space we have to make it as efficient as possible in that
And
sense.
packaging too. I mean, I know that they were very big about, shrink wrapping and getting rid of some of those kind of points.
Yeah, we've taken lots of, it's just the right thing to do, So obviously you've got to have packaging where products are going to get damaged on their way into the store. So there's lots of things where you have to put some kind of packaging on products, but we've done lots and lots and lots to take a lot of plastic out or replace plastic with alternatives. So again, it's back to the tension. I remember about a year and a bit ago, we made a very big decision to change the packaging on some of our mints.
Yeah, I know it well. Yes, absolutely.
It's a good example, right, of the tension. It's one of the highest volume products in our whole range, 5%, 12% mints, very, very popular volume product. And it came in a big tray, and there's lots of plastic in there. So we halve the plastic in our packaging. Lots of customer feedback, lots of pretty aerated customer feedback, right? But in the end, when you cook it, it's the same.
And I was going to ask about that because, this is about change too. And as human beings, some of us are better at change than others, and the speed of change.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to put some of those things in, one thing I would say, Simon, is you're very visible as a chief exec. You write to your customers. You explain why we are doing things. And, 18 months on, probably most of us have got used to the fact that, as you said, that it's the same meat, it's the same packaging. But, what would you be saying to this audience around how you help take your customers sometimes with you? Because it might be a very good reason to do that, and it's no different, but you've still got to sell that idea in, haven't you?
No, you have. And I think you've always got to start with, we can always do this better.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, the only group of people that can decide whether we've done things right or to their expectations are our customers. And so, I definitely wouldn't start from a point of view of, everything we did on that we got perfectly right. I think we learned a huge amount through that process about how we could have communicated even more clearly, how we could have made sure on the pack it was really clear. It's a good example of, the big idea was clear, but, how do we keep making sure we learn how we do it? And I think that the job for all of us as leaders or employees in any customer service industry is every day, every single day, you learn a lot about what you can do better. And I'm very, very lucky in the role that I do, because every evening I get lots and lots of customers write to me. There's a sort of time of the day where people get home from work or, they've cooked the tea for the family and think, right, now it's time to talk about the things that you could have done better. And so, that's an example of where we did a big change. There's lots of others, but my key point here would be you learn a lot from listening to customers as you make those changes.
Yes, and you watch and you observe as well.
Yeah, and you adjust when you need to.
Yeah.
And the packaging, we went back and improved it in that example. And then lots and lots of things. I mean, the way our team work in Sainsbury's, they do amazing jobs. Every single week, we have a meeting to review how we've done. And the first thing we talk about is what was our customer satisfaction the week before in every single dimension of what we did. And if something moved, we really understand what caused it to move. Yeah.
And it may mean that you don't change something as a result of that, but at least you understand. So this whole point of about seeking to understand. Simon, I just want to talk a little bit about upskilling professionalisation of customer service. You know that this is something that's very dear to the Institute in terms of being able to attract more people into the industry. 60% of our workforce work in customer-related roles, but not just to see it as something that I do for a short time, that the skill sets that we're now looking for in customer service professionals are much more complex, for example, than perhaps they were 10 years ago. So we were talking before about we are seeing a bit of a challenge at the moment because some people are leaving customer service because they're not feeling perhaps as loved by organisations as they should do or as invested in that. You made a comment earlier about your people being king and you pay them a good wage in terms of connection. But what about development, and how can we ensure, not just in retail, but in the wider space, that customer service professionals are a bit more respected and that we can see there's a proper career for them?
No, it's a brilliant question, and one that we've all got to be, really caring about, right? Because as you say, so much of our economy is driven by, really dedicated people providing a service every day. And if we don't get the balance of skills right, and also the diversity of skills right as well, then there's an economic downside to that situation. So I think, look, it's, just in terms of the way we can fight it, it's not just about pay. And I want to really make that point. But I think it's an important principle not to step over. And so our start point is that we work in a competitive industry. We have to make sure that we're very attractive as a place to work.
And fair.
And definitely fair. But also, if you want to work in this industry, it's hard work.
Yes.
Thousands of our people this morning would have been up at 3:00, heading to the store, filling up the store, baking bread, picking online products. It's hard. It's a hard job. And so making sure we prioritise paying our colleagues fairly, but at a leading rate in the market is very important to us, alongside all the other things that need to go, into providing a great customer service. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, just as we don't always get everything right for our customers, we don't always get everything right for our colleagues. You've got to listen, haven't you? You've got to be, really dialed in, as and any of our leaders in our company do this. So we do lots of listening with our colleagues. Every month, for example, a bit like we're doing now, we have just a really open call where any one of our team can dial in and ask me anything they want to talk about. Because, one of the things about, I think, a customer environment is it's very intense, and you need a way also as a colleague or a member of the team to share and offload what's happening in your part of the business. So two-way communication, listening, really understanding what's really going on. Our people in each part of this is a really important part of that as well. And I think that's part of building a professional respect for the role that everybody
because everyone has a voice, a genuine voice.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I think, look, one of the big things we need to see as we all work with this new government to help shape their agenda is we need a real focus, don't we, on skills and capabilities. And, I think, I'm sure it's on your mind, Joe, it's on the mind of many businesses. It's good to see the early signs of the shift on the apprenticeship levy. That's good, but it's still a long way to go. We need to create a real platform for businesses to prioritise investment in training and skills, and particularly in service, because, that really requires a long-term sustained effort, and policy needs to help that. So I think it's a combination of, looking after the priorities that people feel fairly and well rewarded and engaged, making sure you really understand, what's going on in support of people serving and looking after customers every day, and where things aren't right, adjusting things accordingly. And then thirdly, creating a real investment around, capability and skills in customer service, because it's such a critical part of what we do in the UK every day.
And on the wider scale, and therefore the policy and what we're asking of government. And I know that you are particularly championing the apprenticeship levy, as you know that the Institute is also in terms of that.
It's brilliant the work the Institute have been leading on this, and I think there's just been so much wasted money actually that could have gone into great training. And look, one of the things we would say is just to make sure we use every single pound of that levy to help improve skills.
Yeah. Totally. And, you mentioned obviously having a new government forming that. The UK is not without its challenges at the moment, and we don't live in an isolated bubble, do we? And the whole world has got significant challenges. So, but I do think this is a huge opportunity to really raise the profile and the impact that customer service can have to a business. And I know that that's something that you feel very strongly about as well. There's one bit just to that about how we try and help organisations maybe and businesses to be less short term in our thinking and that longer term. And that is another tension, isn't it? Because every week you're having to return to the shareholder and, that whole kind of piece. But any thoughts, Simon, that we can try and encourage us to be thinking further out, because surely that is the only way that we're going to be able to sustain our businesses.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a key question, isn't it? Which is what I'm doing today leading to long term?
Yes.
How we create, better outcomes for customers, improve value for stakeholders, and a more sustainable way of doing things.
Yes.
And it's quite hard when you're dealing with short-term challenges to always make sure it's connecting into that long-term picture, isn't it? Which is why, one of the things that, I would say in our organisation we've been really working on is, what does it take to become really purpose-driven?
Yes.
And I don't say that as a kind of grand, phrase. The reason I say it is because if you're really clear as a team, as a business, on where you want to get to in the long term, it really helps then sort out some of the choices closer to now, which you need to make, yes or no decisions on. And maybe just a couple of examples of the sort of things it's helped us with. So, you asked about long-term thinking. As I was describing, we work obviously in the UK food space. And we've got a real challenge in the UK about our resilience of the food we produce here. I mentioned it earlier on. So one of the things that has been quite different that we've been working on is that we would have agreed with our suppliers, contracts for a year, 18 months, and then we'd come back and renegotiate those. And in lots of our fresh food categories, we're now agreeing contracts over 7 and 10 years.
Okay.
Why is that really important? Well, it's really important because if I'm producing fresh vegetables, let's say, back to your question on automation, it's very hard to go and commit to big investment in capital infrastructure to pick vegetables in that case, unless you're really sure that you've got a long-term volume commitment. And so, we actually this morning just had all of our key produce suppliers together, and we were talking about exactly this point. If you're going to produce more sustainably with less impact on the environment, then same rules apply. So a lot of our work in our business is about helping suppliers have more confidence. And then the other point is that if you think in longer timeframes, trust is just much higher, isn't it? Because we're not sitting opposite each other across the table once a year.
I'm wondering whether you're going to still be here in 12 months.
So, I think it's a good opportunity just to kind of reset the rules of partnership. And when you do that, I always think about, when you're leaning in at kind of 45 degrees each, no one can fall over. So you're building trust, you're creating a longer term picture, and you're linking it to really where you want to get to. So it's something we really passionately believe in, and it's true with our suppliers, it's true with partners, it's true with our colleagues. We don't always get these things right, but how do we think longer term?
I love that phrase, about the fact you're all leaning in.
Yeah.
And I know that you're really big on that, Simon, about leaning in together to resolve that particular issue. And it does feel much more than like it is a partnership, and it does feel that everyone has a place to play in that piece. Simon, I know you've been very generous with your time, so I don't want to take too much more of it. But I suppose my final question really would be is, you not only are you CEO of Sainsbury's, you do lots of other things in terms of trying to help business to be perceived well. You mentioned about reputation and trust. So if you could ask for one thing, Simon, in terms of the UK and perhaps to nail it down a little bit more on the service agenda, what would you encourage other CEOs perhaps in industry sectors that maybe are not perhaps as focused as you might be on what we've been talking about this afternoon, why they should do that, and what would you like them to do more of?
Well, look, I'm an optimist, and I see and hear and have the privilege to meet lots of leaders and different stakeholders, and I actually think there's quite a big sea change underway at the moment. Because actually competition and the level of change means there's no option, actually, if you want to have a successful business outcome, to get closer to customers. And, one of the things, just I would observe in our industry and the one I'm part of, as we said, it's really intensely competitive. But quite a lot of topics, pretty competitively, we're working actually quite closely together, right? And sustainability is a good example of that. So I think at the kind of system level, there's good evidence actually of business working differently.
Yeah.
In the end, there's only two things I think that really sort of differentiate businesses that are really focused on customers, to your question, and maybe those that could be more so, and that is being really close to what customers are thinking and feeling all the time, isn't it? Because, that really does tell you to what extent you're meeting your long-term commitment here and now. And I think one of the things that's quite encouraging in a lot of, leaders I'm privileged to spend time with is that lots of people spend more time and value spending more time doing that. And look, the work of the Institute in that area is really good. And then I think we've got a massive opportunity actually to work with this new government to link their key objective, growth, with the difference that customer service can make to growth. And there's such a hard wire there that I think now is the time to really amplify.
Yeah, and push on that.
Totally, it's all of the work on the return on investment made in service and skills and capabilities, in automation, as we've talked today. I think we have to make it really clear, how that links to growth.
Yeah.
And if that is clear, then policies will flow from that, and expectations will rise, which is what we need to see.
Simon, thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon.
Thank
I
you.
really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Simon. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Simon as much as I did. It is absolutely a pleasure to be able to spend time with business leaders, understanding about what keeps them awake at night when it comes to service, business and the wider economy, and more importantly, what they're doing about it. So join me next time for a slightly different but no less interesting conversation with economist Simon French. Until then, do take care.